It's Tuesday, May 14th. It is the afternoon as I record this. I want to give you a date and timestamp because this is a time-sensitive video. There are things that are going to happen within a few hours to overnight to the next few weeks. And so I want to encapsulate and share some of what I'm watching, some indicators. I've got them highlighted on the screen. So let's just run through them and then I'll share tabs and talk briefly about each one and my thoughts with respect to them. First off, I'm watching for FTDs. I'm looking for a data release update on that. More on that in a bit. Then Envo, which is the second brand that NIO is going to be releasing. And then there's also U.S. inflation data with potential U.S. market volatility. And then how about a possible NIO May delivery surprise? Lastly, but certainly not least, the first quarter earnings late May. I actually think it's going to be around June 5th, and I'll share why in just a minute. So let's now look at, and I want to share this. I want to share Laser's information as well. He's been tracking and doing videos on NIO. He's looking for a reversal for NIO to the upside, but he's very neutral and unbiased in his presentation, which I appreciate. He talks about both moves to the upside or downside potentially. So with that in mind, that's why I responded to his post here earlier today. And now let's keep it moving. Let's go to the fails to deliver chart. For those who aren't familiar with this, I've talked about it extensively, and I actually have a number of videos. I've created a playlist, in fact, with some of the video content, including this, and that is under, I think, Wall Street, something about manipulation, and I was kind of making fun of Wall Street. In any event, the yellow indicates price action for NIO. This is the whole history of NIO stock trading in the US. Then you've got the white lines, which represent fails to deliver. Now, it is possible that those fails to deliver could represent fake shares that are used to suppress stock price action. And so with that in mind, it gets really interesting when you consider there's only been one time frame where the fails to deliver dropped off to what probably is a normal level. And the rest of the time, they've been very elevated, big spikes. But the one time where they did drop off, look at how that stock price ran. This is the 2020 time frame. And an interesting couple of points here. First off, I didn't realize until I really broke down the data, NIO stock tends to move up faster than it moves down. And here's an example. It took a little less than 7 months for NIO stock to trade and move from around $3 to about $54. But conversely, it's taken almost 2.5 years for the NIO stock price to go from the $40 range to sub $5. So that's crazy, but it's also something I want to have some awareness of, because if this thing does start taking off, I want to not be shocked. So one of the indicators is the FTDs. This represents, I don't know if you can see it there, it's a 5 million spike on the FTDs. We haven't seen that high of a spike on a single day reported since back before the big run for the NIO stock price. And that is one of the reasons I want to see what the newest data is going to be. The problem is the data is still going to be delayed. It's lagging. We never get access to real-time data. But as you can see here, the fails to deliver have been spiking along with the NIO stock price, continuing to see downtrend and pressure, it looks like, to the downside. So that's why it's an indicator. It's something I'm tracking. I will come back with a video once I have some updated data to share. But let's move on now, because we've also got Envo, and this is going to happen tonight, actually, our time or my time. I'm here in the US. This is the second brand, Envo, that NIO is going to have with its global debut on May 15th. I believe it's going to be at 7:30 Beijing time, but check the NIO website because I'm not for sure if I'm accurate on that. And since I'm not positive, I'll also link two guys, China-driven, which is Will. He owns an ET7, and Jason, I think one or both will be at the event and or live streaming. So I'll include their information so you can kind of follow along. These are all, we've got a lot of things happening. And so I wanted to share some of the things I'm watching. This isn't all of it, but it's some of it. Next up, we've got the U.S. Consumer Price Index. This CPI report for April is scheduled to be released on Wednesday, May 15th. At 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the Wednesday market could get interesting. But the reason I've selected this piece to share with you is please, please, please take the time to read some of this technical note that goes on, and that is followed by the errors that happen with CPI, and basically the justification or the explanation of why they're always wrong with their data. It's really simple if you ask me. If I want to know what CPI is, what I'm having to pay for things, I just think about the pricing. I think about the cost of gas. I think about the cost of food items, let's say eggs, milk, bread. And if it's significantly higher than it was, let's say 5 years ago, then I know the CPI data is probably a lot worse and higher than what we're being told. It's not hard. It doesn't have to be. But without actually looking into the technicalities and even their disclaimers for why they're basically wrong every time they report, I don't think people could truly appreciate it. So yes, a little bit of nerding out on that data, but I wanted to share that and offer it for those who do pay attention. Now let's talk about why we could have a surprise on the May deliveries. I've been tracking this weekly data, which does not come from NIO, but I've been tracking it for a very long time, since the end of 2022. And we've got a really nice trend emerging, and it can be best probably demonstrated if I show you right down here. This 2,100 number represents the beginning of April. Normally, the beginning of the months have the lowest numbers on the weeklies. And so that's why it mattered to me when we had this 3,600 number to start May. But we also had a 5,000 number at the end of April. Now, the end of the months typically is when we see the best data for NIO on the weeklies, and it sets up for what kind of number we're going to get on the monthly deliveries. This set up nicely for an over 15,000 number in April, and that surprised people. With that in mind, we are moving higher faster at an earlier point in May. So I do think it's possible that we see a couple of big numbers. And also of note, this 5,000 number, this is the first time NIO had that in a single week since 2023. It was the last week of the year, the last time that NIO had a 5,000 or plus number. So the fact that we're already kind of reigning in that 5,000 range is very, very interesting. Now, the reason I'm thinking we may have the earnings from NIO on around June 5th is if we go back to the third quarter earnings, they reported those from 2023 in December. It was on December 5th. And I thought this was consistent, a short-term pattern anyway. So then I looked at the most recent, it was March 5th. So if that remains in play and NIO does stay consistent, and they don't always, sometimes they move the dates around, but that would maybe indicate that June 5th will be when they'll do the next report. And basically that sets all of this up. You've got positives, you've got potential negatives, you've got a lot of craziness, a lot of things to track and watch. And so especially with that, if they, let's say, report on June 5th, that'll be really interesting following what could be a surprise on the May delivery numbers. But I think by then we'll have a pretty good sense, because we'll also have more fails to deliver data. We'll have a pretty good sense of where we're sitting and maybe whether shorts are still in control of this thing or not. And if there's a surprise to the upside for NIO in that earnings, maybe they get torched. Maybe they get torched before. I don't know what happens, but I wanted to share some of the things I'm watching with you. And again, because it's time sensitive, I was a little rushed, but I wanted to get this thing up so that I can edit and get it out as soon as possible. Thank you. Have a great day. We'll see you all again very soon.